Hey everybody, how's it going? It's AgentNemitz back again today with the doctor.
Woo!
We're here again today breaking down She-Hulk episode numero dos, number 2. This one, I didn't do it last week. I should have done it again, and I didn't do it this week. I'll do it next week. Is the title of the episode. No idea what the title is.
Yeah, that's true.
Didn't write them down. I don't remember. They're on Disney Plus. If you want to know, go look at Disney Plus. They have the titles all written out and a little summary for you. But beyond that, we are going to summarize and then break down episode 2 of She-Hulk. So let's just hop right into it.
Let's do it. Man, it was like she was on a high because she just saved a bunch of people.
Yep.
She didn't think she'd ever turn green again. She's in the courtroom, the end of the last episode, saves a bunch of people. They head off to a party, kind of, and she gets to this bar where only lawyers are, supposedly.
Yep.
And she hears the chant from outside, She-Hulk, She-Hulk. A little upset about the name, but that's okay. She goes in, and like everybody's celebrating her. Then all of a sudden, her boss comes, talks to her, and is like, "You're fired. You're gone. I can't have you." Then she's like, "Oh my gosh!" So she's on this down. Then she's like, "No big deal. I'll just go get another job."
Yeah.
Shows interview, can't get a job. Then her family's like having their dinner,
Yep.
and her dad meets her at the door and goes, "Hey, everything's gonna be okay. I already talked to everybody. Nobody's gonna mention it." She walks in. Her cousin goes, "Oh, you got fired from the job," and blows it up. And she's like,
Come on.
and everything just is negative. And anyway, she was all upset. She ends up back at the same bar where they were celebrating her. She's just there upset, and then the guy walks in, who happens to be, who was it?
The guy from the last episode who she was doing the trial against. It's like Holden Holloway is his name.
There we go. This is what's the abbreviation?
GLK&H.
There you go, GLK&H. I was like, oh, I hope he knows it. But anyways, so he's the main guy, and he's like, "I want to give you a job."
Nope.
And she's like, "I'll take it." She just like takes it right off the bat. Well, then she goes to work, big, huge tower, beautiful building. She's strutting up there, kind of something funny, runs into the door and messes up. Well, he meets her right in front. Right. And he's like, "Oh, wait, you gotta be Hulk while you're here. You gotta be She-Hulk." So she Hulks it out, and now she goes, and he goes, "I got your first case. It's Jablonski, right?"
Yeah.
Go ahead. You go from here.
Okay.
Emil
It's
Blonsky?
Emil Blonsky, yeah.
Blonsky, sorry. I don't know where I get Jablonski.
Jablonski.
Hey, Jablonski!
It's Emil Blonsky from Incredible Hulk back in 2008. You know, the Incredible Hulk movie. He was Abomination. Tim Roth played Emil Blonsky, the Abomination, and he comes back in this episode and this whole series to play Abomination Jablonski again. And she's like, "What? I got a serious conflict of interest. He tried to kill my cousin." And he's like, "It doesn't matter." The boss is like, "I don't care."
Yeah, I get through it.
Yeah, whatever. And then he's like, "You should at least go meet with him before you decide." So she goes, talks to him. He pleads his case. She calls up Bruce and basically tells him, "Here's where the situation I'm in. I'm basically got to take this case, or I don't have a job. I'm taking the case." He's like, "No big deal. No skin on my teeth. We kind of settled our beef. He sent me a letter, yada, yada, yada." And then she's like, "Okay." Calls the boss. He's like, "Okay, cool. Might want to turn on the news." And that's where the episode ends. And then, of course, there's a post-credit scene, which we'll talk about. But that's the gist of the episode, the whole summarization. It's pretty roller coaster of an episode. Highs and lows. A little shorter than last week. Yeah. But just because it was shorter, there's still a lot of stuff packed in there that we got to break down for you. And that's what we're going to do right now. All right, so we start things out pretty crazy, kind of summarizing the last episode, goes into the Marvel title like we all know and love, and then starts talking about the trial from last week and at the very ending of the show, how Titania came in, they show all this like artwork from it, and then they interview people, different news outlets are there, and they start talking about it all. It's pretty crazy. They label Titania as what they call like a super influencer type thing, which actually is a real thing in our world. It's for like the top tier social media digital influencers are actually labeled super influencer. It's a real thing, not just superhero influencer as they kind of alluded to here. But it is a real thing. And then all the news outlets, they show like 3 different news outlets. They show KPVK15 and then KZYO12. Both of those were in Ant-Man and the Wasp reporting on Giant Man, actually. So those are kind of callbacks to previous MCU titles. Those aren't just like brand new things that they introduced here. And then the other one is New Los Angeles Now, which could be tied into KRXJ6, which was last seen in Iron Man 3 when Tony was coming out after seeing Happy kind of be all messed up and he talked to him and then threw the guy's phone. That was maybe they're tied to that because they had the same color scheme and stuff. And then Titania's lawyers at the bottom of that news reel say like, oh, it was a severe case, a misunderstanding and a severe case of low blood sugar. Kind of like, yeah, just don't worry about it. You know, it happens. Typical social media influencer type things, you know? So then also they go to the very first eyewitness case of the She-Hulk trial, and he gives the very like first, it's like kind of like a chick Hulk, a She-Hulk, if you will. So that's where the name She-Hulk kind of comes from in this world, but also that does tie into the comics. That's exactly where they got her name in the She-Hulk comics was they wanted to make a woman Hulk. Kind of like how there's a woman Spider-Man. Marvel is like, hey, these are our popular properties. We're going to take them and kind of make the alternate version. So if it was a male, it turned to a female, male. They kind of, flipped the scripts. That way they were like, oh, if it becomes popular enough, we'll just kind of have it all. We have all the IP copyrighted, all that jazz, So that's where the name comes from in the comics and also in the MCU.
Yeah.
Next, bam, they're at the bar that my dad spoke about that is in this episode quite a bit. It's called Legal Ease, which is kind of a play on words to legalese, which is an actual term used in courtrooms and stuff like that. And so it's kind of a play on words. It's very green bar, kind of like alluding, She-Hulk. And then this is actually, they do have a bar in the comics that She-Hulk goes to quite a bit for all the lawyers and attorneys and all that. They all hang out there. It's kind of like their spot, And in the comics, that's a very prominent part of the whole She-Hulk character and her origin as well, just like we're seeing in this show. So she comes in and we see she's wearing a sweatshirt because at the end when she hulked out in the last episode, she kind of tore through her blazer and her shirt and it was all messed up. And like we mentioned last time, lawyers have a lot of sets of clothes kind of in their office because sometimes they have to pull all-nighters and they don't want to be wearing the same clothes for hours on end. So they have alternate clothes and she's wearing a hoodie, kind of like alternate clothes. And then they come in and she's like, I don't really like this name She-Hulk, but of course, it is what it is. They wanted to stick true to the comics, I think, here, and kind of do a joke as well. I mean, of course. And then, of course, they reference how, I'm not a superhero. Superheroes are for geniuses, billionaires, philanthropists, and kind of like a reference to all the other crazy... And orphans, narcissists, I think she threw in there. Kind of referencing all the original superheroes, or specifically Tony Stark, I'm sure you thought of when you thought of that. Or maybe if you're thinking DC, you're thinking Batman type people. But it's kind of a trope with heroes, They're all adult orphans, I guess, or super rich or something like that. And then, of course, she does get fired. The trial, because she hulked out and saved the jury, they're like, we had to label it a mistrial because it was kind of like, obviously you were going to win, but they didn't want to sway that because you saved everybody, which is it's a thing that happens in the real world. They can get swayed. Yeah. But I think that's such a cop-out. It's so silly that it happened like that. But I'm sure stuff like that really does happen in the real world. So then we get the intro. It shows the She-Hulk intro, which ends up switching from attorney at law to like attorney for hire or something like that, because it's showing that she's not employed anymore, And so that's typical law show format too. All of the big law shows, Law and Order, all these other shows, they kind of do have a brief intro, and then they do their like title card screen thing that plays every episode intro. And then of course, she gets a call from Bruce, and And she, her nickname Fuzzball is actually something kind of cool that the actors said in an interview, is that nickname Fuzzball was actually improvised, that Mark Ruffalo actually came up with that nickname himself based on her hair, because it's all fuzzy and wavy and stuff. So that was kind of an improvised thing, but they ran with it. He said it multiple times in the show already. And so that's kind of a little cool detail you might not have known. So then, of course, she goes to interviews after interviews, getting turned down, can't have a superhuman lawyer, too much attention, all this stuff. And so then, bam, she's in her office with her friend, has junk food, wine, stuff everywhere. So clearly she's like down in the dumps, ordering takeout, feeling bad for herself, on her computer, looking at an article, and this article is just chock full of Easter eggs. Has so much stuff in it. It has like a Where's My Waldo style of Find Ant-Man. And there's an Avengers tab in the upper corner. There's even Iron Man 3s, which is like a pair of shoes, kind of like Jordan style, but for Iron Man. There's a Wolverine reference in the articles, and it says a man gets in a fight with metal claws in a bar, and it's like, what? How can this be anybody except Wolverine? Because that's kind of like, he's just gruff. And in the first X-Men movie, that's how we get introduced to Hugh Jackman Wolverine, in a bar fight. So, I mean, it's just, there's so many Easter eggs. There's even more than I mentioned, but there's so many Easter eggs. It's crazy. They even mention how there's a celestial hand and head poking out of the ground. They finally referenced that. It's the first time it's been referenced since the Eternals movie. It seems like that'd be a big point of detail that they talk about, is like, yeah, there's just a giant head and hand sticking out of the earth, but we finally just talk about it now. I don't know. So then we see Jen get a text from her mom. Her wallpaper is Captain America's butt. She's so silly. She's talking about Cap in the last episode. She must like Cap a lot. Got a picture of his butt as her wallpaper. And then she has family dinner. And is Bruce's mom there? I'm pretty sure that is Bruce's mom. She doesn't say a single word the whole time, but I'm pretty sure that's Bruce's mom who's there, kind of cameoing in the background. You see her, she doesn't talk. And then, of course, you got the cousin that they mentioned before, Ched. He's like he gets promoted. Good job, Ched. You're Best Buy manager now, or whatever you are, but he's kind of a goofball. And then her dad asks about Hawkeye, which we know the answer to his question. I'm sure everybody was like, oh, I know the answer to this. He does go collect some of his arrows. Some of the other ones he doesn't go collect, though, because they're specialty one-use arrows or whatever. But we saw in the Hawkeye series that he does go and collect his arrows. If you haven't watched that series, go watch it. It's pretty cool. Set around Christmas time. Kind of a Christmas show. But it's a pretty good show. I recommend you go watch that. And then, of course, Jen's dad, he's so nice and wholesome, asks if she's okay, pulls her aside, then just lets her kind of rip, roar, and talk. And he's like, hey, at least you didn't tear down a city, like the Hulk has done on multiple occasions, of course, that we know of, we've seen, and maybe more times than we have seen. He's tore down some cities or some college campuses. Then she goes to the bar, and of course, she gets a job offer from Holden Holloway. We see him appear kind of out of nowhere. He's so super shady. He's got these looks and kind of disrespectful. No. Has some really expensive wine that he offers and is like, yeah, I got a job. And she, like, before he even really can say anything, he's like, I accept. I'll take it. I'll take the job. And then she shows up the next day to get the job. And he's like, oh yeah, by the way, you need to be a Hulk. And she's like, what? I have to be Hulk for the whole time? Which is completely opposite from the comics. The comics was complete 180 of this, was totally didn't want her to be Hulk at all, or She-Hulk, because it would sway people, and he wanted her to just have good lawyering. Just be a good lawyer, please. But not here. He wants the big names, the big cases, the money, the publicity that all comes with the She-Hulk, which is a little strange. It's a little strange. And then while they're walking to her office, we see this one guy has a wall of comic books. It's crazy. And we're like, what is it? Why do they have comic books? Well, I think that's a reference to, in the comics specifically, the lawyer agencies would use comic books as references to stuff that happened in the past or to incriminate people if they were like a super villain, not a superhero, and incriminate them or build evidence on them, because the comic books were almost like their like history books, you know. So I think that's a reference to that, and it's kind of crazy that it just in a lawyer office there's a whole wall of comic books. I think that's just wild. But then we get introduced to Pug. He's an actor who played another superhero TV show. He was in the Arrow TV show, which I personally love. I know it's a different universe, but I got started. I love that show. It's a good show. He played a villain. But in here, he is a fellow lawyer, and he's another character from the comics in this. We get a lot of comic book She-Hulk references in this. He's a character who really likes She-Hulk. They're kind of like really good friends, and he helps her out on many occasions. Got a very interesting, in-depth backstory, but very, very big part of the She-Hulk comics and character. So then she gets her first case, and it is Abomination, which we talked about. Tim Roth returns to play Emil Blonsky, Abomination, and she's like, I kind of got a conflict of interest, but she has to go check it out anyways before she can decide. And she goes to see him. On the way there, it's this crazy, huge prison. It's actually the DODC prison that we saw a couple months ago in the Miss Marvel TV show. It's the same prison that the clandestines ended up being in and escaping from real easily. But this is a prison, and we believe it's called the Cube, which is from the comics, over on the West Coast. It housed some superhuman individuals, and it's a huge supermax prison we see. And we get a little callback to Silence of the Lambs, or as I better know it from the Garfield movies, where got some fava beans and a nice Chianti, and then they're like, yeah, they kind of, just do a little joke in it. I like it. It's kind of cool. Then, of course, we see Abomination Tim Roth, and he's in the same cell from the Shang-Chi movies. We saw Abomination in Shang-Chi, and actually we wouldn't have seen him in Shang-Chi if he wasn't going to come back in this show. It kind of was put in there as an Easter egg for this show coming up. And so they plant stuff like this periodically.
And then, I didn't mention this to you, but do you think that they based that whole cylinder on what they had up on the helicarrier?
Yeah.
For when they brought Loki. And of course, they really made it for who?
For Hulk, yeah.
For Hulk.
I think that's a great Easter egg that not many people have realized. It is. It's like that cylinder.
Yeah, that same cylinder.
That's thing. And it did look like it could raise and lower into certain places, And so it's kind of like, it is. I think it's based off of the shield design from Avengers that we saw. Like you mentioned, Loki was in it, but it was originally meant for Hulk. Then Thor gets trapped in it, all this stuff. So I do think it's based on that, which is really, really interesting. So I wonder, it definitely raises and lowers. I wonder if it lowers down into something that would contain him more, or maybe it would him. I don't know. I don't know. How else would you contain someone like that? I really don't know. So that's crazy. But it is the same cell that we see kind of in the background of Shang-Chi before, with Wong. And so that's really cool that they stayed true to that. And hopefully we see Wong again. We kind of see him at the end of this episode. Maybe we'll see him in the future. Hopefully so. And then Abomination, he starts talking. He starts telling all about how, what happened to him, how he was working for the government. You can tell he's trying his hardest not to be bitter, but when he mentions Hulk, he just has this look in his eyes, and you can tell he's really fighting off those anger feelings towards him. And he's I don't know. Do you believe him? I don't know if I believe him. Do you believe him? Let us know in the comments below if you believe him. I don't think he's necessarily reformed. I think he's really putting on an act.
Oh, for sure.
And once he gets out, I think he is gonna kind of go crazy. But I don't know.
That could be one of the first people that she goes and gets.
Yeah, could be.
Oh, especially because after she talked to Bruce.
Yeah.
Bruce, all of a sudden she doesn't hear Bruce. Well, it shows he was on that ship from the first episode.
Right.
And goes, pew, flies off into the universe somewhere.
Yeah.
So if something goes down, Bruce isn't there to fight Abomination.
Exactly.
She-Hulk's got to do it.
Yeah. Or Hulk's got to come back last minute, but how is he going to know?
Exactly.
It's he's gone, basically. He's gone. So, But anyways, and then he mentions Emil Blonsky, mentions his 7 soulmates, which it's is that a reference to the Thunderbolts? Or is that we do see in the trailers, we see some women who come like for his trial, maybe in the next episode. And it's like, are those the 7 soulmates? Is he telling the truth? Or is that the Thunderbolts that he's referencing? Could be. Could be just us maybe thinking it's the Thunderbolts, but who knows? I think it is a confirmed title in, I believe, Phase 5. The Thunderbolts is at the very end of Phase 5 coming up here. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see if he's going to be part of the Thunderbolts or not. So, and then I think Emil's point of view of everything is very interesting. Kind of a different way to see things because, of course, you know, he was the villain of the movie, so we didn't necessarily see it through his eyes. But he says, you know, I was a decorated war hero, and I was just trying to do what the government told me to do. The Hulk was a target, all this stuff. But he kind of was half-truth in it, you know. He wasn't telling the full truth of, like, I went and sought out to get the blood and inject myself, all this stuff. He didn't say that, but if you watch the movie, you know what happens. He holds the guy to gunpoint and then is like, give me his blood, I want more power, and then he turns into the Abomination. Because before, he was just normal. Well, not normal. Superhuman. He had the super soldier serum. But I do see why he's saying, and it could make a case for him being kind of under the influence of a serum that changed his brain chemistry. I can see that kind of passing in the court of law, probably. And then, of course, you mentioned she calls Hulk and's like, hey, I got, you know, I have to take this case in order to get this job, yada, yada, yada. And then we see he's on a ship. He's on the ship, the Sicarian cruiser. And then he flies off to who knows where, like we said. And he has, it looked like an office in there. I mean, like he had a desk, he had some technology, he had that binder of all the Hulk information that we saw in episode 1. So what's he going to do? Is he going to teach someone? Is he going somewhere for a long time, going back to Sakaar? Where's he going? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. I mean, this is really interesting. Why is he going somewhere? Where is he going? I don't know. And then, of course, she calls Holden Holloway, is like, I'll take the case. And he's like, you might want to turn on the news. And we see the footage of Abomination fighting Wong in the Macau fighting arena from Shang-Chi, which we believe happened a couple months ago. So now the footage is getting released, finally. And everyone thinks he escaped. And then that'll probably be where we pick up next episode. But it's just crazy. It's so crazy. All this stuff happening now, right at the worst time for Abomination. Like, couldn't have waited maybe a couple more weeks till he maybe got exonerated, but I don't know. It probably is going to play into the points next episode. And then, of course, we get some more art in the credits showing some stuff. It shows the poop map more in depth. You see the whole superhuman law team of GLK and H, and there's another woman there that hopefully we'll see in some future episodes. It's going to be a character that'll probably play into some of the cases. And then, of course, we see Pug there, and Holden Holloway, Jen, the paralegal, all that. And then the end credit scene is She-Hulk lifting a bunch of stuff, lifting a car, lifting a bunch of waters, you know, doing stuff around the house for the dad, and Ched's sitting there being useless. So it's so funny, but it's just a little kind of like joke, you know, like, and she even says, I'm glad you're staying hydrated, but this is a little overkill, you know. And so, but that's this episode. That's everything we spotted. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for coming and checking out the video. Thanks again to the doctor for coming in today. We got the art hung on the wall from last episode. If you remember, it wasn't hung yet. But thanks for coming and hanging out. Really appreciate y'all showing up. And the love on the last episode. Thank you so much. That was amazing. We were blown away by all the views. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next one. Episode 3 video coming soon.
It's real soon.
Yep, and we'll see you in the next one. So take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, if you want to go ahead and click on these videos here, you can click to subscribe. You can watch the latest video or whatever YouTube is recommending from my channel that you watch.